Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Sinister Ideas podcast. I'm your host, Danny Thompson, the left-handed writer. And just as a reminder, there's nothing nefarious going on here at Sinister Ideas. Sinister is simply from the Latin word, meaning sinister, meaning from the left. So, as I mentioned before, I named it that because I thought it was funny. You're free to agree or disagree as you see fit. So let's call today's episode Sinister Ideas about Dealing with Ambiguity. And here I'm talking about ambiguity in life itself. And so where is this episode coming from? Well, it's a funny thing. After my last episode, which I talked about protecting yourself from inflation, and that I don't play the 1 to 3% cost of living annual raise game, right? It goes back to the things I've learned from my grandfather about how to work and how to be successful. And after that episode posted, I literally ended up getting a raise and a promotion, which was funny because I wasn't up for an annual review. It's actually about 6.5 months from my last raise and promotion. And I say this not to brag, but one, to say, sometimes you can speak your own vision into existence. It's a thing that happens. I don't know that I believe in all the mysticism and the secret and all that, but it's weird how things happen sometimes. The second reason I bring it up is because now, not only am I building this new social media aspect of our company that I was already slated to build, but now I'm adding a whole bunch of new functions into my plate. And so it's been a couple of weeks, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around everything that, my day, my month, my year now entails. And, excuse me, it can be frustrating at times. And I can see how, it would be easy to get overwhelmed in a situation like this. And so I wanted to take this episode and talk a little bit about how I avoid getting steamrolled by all of the new things that are being added to my plate and all the new responsibilities I'm having to take on. All right, well, let's talk about this a little bit. So I was already supposed to be building the social media thing, and then that got paused, and then it suddenly got unpaused, and now here you have a team to manage to help you build this thing and put it together. So we're in the process of figuring out our process and our workflow and what that looks like, and it's going to be something that evolves over the next year, which is fine. I expected that. And now I have all of these other responsibilities that are being added on my plate, that are slowly being offloaded from other people onto me, just because it fits in my new role. And so now I'm trying to organize all of these different moving parts that are now my responsibility. And the first thing I have to remember is, if you recall a few episodes ago, a philosophy I had to learn early on, which is everything is my fault, right? Even if it's not my fault, somewhere I made a decision or took an action that put me in a place where whatever is happening to me could happen to me. And so I knew full well going in that, following my grandfather's advice, work for the salary you want, not the salary you make. And if you want job security, make yourself as indispensable as possible to as many people as possible. If you do that, people are going to give you extra responsibilities, and hopefully compensate you for it. But so when I'm helping to shape the new social media thing and taking on all these other responsibilities, wrapping my head around them, organizing, figuring out where they are now, where we want them to be, and start developing the plan to get them there, I always have to remember that in this case, in a very real and literal sense, I asked for this, right? These are all things that I offered to help people with, or because of other things I'd done, people asked me to help with, and I gladly said yes, and I did them, and people liked the way I did them, and so now they're all my responsibility. You know, on those days when there is a lot and it's overwhelming and I'm not sure how I'm going to get everything done, the first thing I have to admit to myself is that this is my fault. Now, when you do that, you know, even if things didn't happen necessarily the way you expected them to happen, if it's your fault, that means you also have the responsibility to fix it. If it was my power to bring this upon myself, now it's in my power to do something about it, to fix it. So that's what I have to do. Years ago, I guess it's probably it's more than 20 years now, a researcher named Michael J. Gelb, author and huge Da Vinci fan, wrote a book called How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. And it was really interesting. He broke it down into 7 qualities that Da Vinci had that showed up throughout his work. And one of those was a concept called sfumato. And if I remember correctly, sfumato is basically just Latin or Italian for smoke or vapor or something like that. But the concept was the idea that you had to realize that the world tends toward chaos, right? That's the scientific theory of entropy. And as a result, everything is not going to be neat and orderly and tidy. Not only all of the times, most of the times, life is not going to be neat, orderly, and tidy. And so you have to become comfortable with sitting in layers of ambiguity where you may not be entirely sure what's happening or what's going on or what's expected or what's needed. And so you have to just recognize that the ambiguity is there and it's part of life. Now, once you have that, he had other qualities that Da Vinci had, and he labeled them in Italian terms, but basically it's art and science, right? So you have the left brain, right brain, sort of a holistic thinking. So you're looking at things from a scientific, investigative standpoint, and you're also looking at it from a creative, exploratory standpoint. There's also the use of the 5 senses, right? And that's, that. And then there's also something called connection, and what in Italian was corporalita, which is basically meant the body, right? Of the body. And so when you're feeling lost in the sense of ambiguity, what you need to do is, first off, just sit in your own body, right? And realize that, no matter what else is going on, you are a person, you're distinct, you are concrete. We're going back to Descartes, I think, therefore I am, right? The fact that you exist is where you start. And then from there you go into the 5 senses. All right, let's see what's around me. Let's take this, whatever this is that's got all this ambiguity to it. All right, what can we touch? What can we see? What can we hear, right? If it makes sense, what can we smell and taste about it? So you're anchoring yourself to reality, and the real concrete things that exist in this sea of ambiguity. From there, you bring in the art and science, and so you investigate these things that are real in this sea of ambiguity, right? And this goes back to our 5 questions that, or 4 questions we've done in the past. What is this? How is it like something I already know or understand? What if? And if this is true, what else must be true? If it's not true, what does that mean, right? So now we're exploring the pieces of this ambiguity, and now we're starting to draw connections from ourselves to these things and between these things. And so in the middle of all this ambiguity, you can start forming a structure or framework and seeing how it all comes together. And then the art side of that, that goes to the what if, to the creativity, and even the logic to a degree, where, all right, now that we know that there's a framework inside this jumbled mess of ambiguity, let's see what happens if we do this, right? If we do this to this piece, what happens over here? And if we were to take this piece away, if this piece didn't exist, what would happen to the rest of it, right? How could we accomplish what we need to accomplish if this piece didn't exist, right? Or if some outside force, something happened from the outside to come in, right? How would that impact all these other pieces? And so now you're starting to develop the relationships between all these pieces and the outside world, and you're starting to give order to this sense of ambiguity. Now I know that's kind of a high level talking about this sort of thing, but it really does apply no matter what the circumstances. Anytime your life is upended, it may not be something good that is a promotion and a raise, right? I've had plenty of tragedy happen in my life, even recently. And when the rug gets pulled out from under you and you have all this ambiguity, you do the same thing. Say, all right, first let me make sure I've got myself squared away, right? I am here. I am whole or I'm not. I'm healthy or I'm not. All right, once we identify those things, all right, what can we do to mitigate the impact of the fact that I'm not whole or not healthy? And then what is a plan for healing, right? Once you start having a plan that you can start acting on, it doesn't even have to be a detailed plan. You don't have to know every single step. Going back to like our index card planning, right? You come up with, 3, 5, maybe 7 major milestones. And then you focus on that first milestone and you create action steps to get you there. And that's all the plan you need. Right? Now you just start working your action steps. All right. So once you've got the corporate health of the body, right? Physically, I am here. Now you start reaching out and investigating with the 5 senses. All right. So what's the reality of this situation? All right. If we carry it out to its absolute worst, what's the worst that could possibly happen? All right. Can I survive that? Chances are 99 times out of 100, yes, you can probably survive it. It may not look pretty on the other side, but at the absolute worst, you can come out on the other side and start rebuilding. Now, what is the likelihood that the absolute worst will actually happen? Probably not very likely, right? So now we kind of have a scope of, we've got bookends on this ambiguity. It starts with me where I am here and what I need to do to get myself squared away. And then on the outside, it's the absolute worst that could happen and what it would take me to rebuild after that. Your reality is going to exist, this ambiguity exists inside those bookends. So now that, now it's not infinite ambiguity, there's a finite ambiguity there. And now we have something we can start working with. Right. So now you start identifying the bits and pieces of the problem that is happening to us, or rather the problem that's happening that we are now having to react to. And, we start coming up with a plan on, identifying what needs to be done, milestones to get us there, and then action steps to get us towards that first milestone. So it's a very simple process, right? Not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a process that you can easily repeat. And anytime you get overwhelmed, you've got to remind yourself, even though it's not fun and sometimes it's not even 100% true, but again, that mindset of, this is my fault. Something I did brought me to a point where this could happen, and this is a natural consequence of that. Someone else may have instigated it. Some outside force might have exacerbated what would normally have just been a minor situation, and now it's feeling catastrophic. But in the end, something I did brought me here. And that being the case, I now have the, not even responsibility. If what you did brought you here, you have the permission, all the permission you need to do something about it and fix it. It may involve other people, but there are parts of it that you can take complete ownership of. And so you can start working on your side of it. Hopefully that'll influence the other people who have responsibilities in this to do their part. But if not, now we're back to our 3 circles. There are things that I can control, there are things that I can influence, and there are things that I can't influence. If there are things you can control, handle them. If there are things that you can influence, do what you can to influence those things. If you can't, well, in that case, you're just going to have to suck it up and roll with the punches and quit worrying about it. Because if there's nothing that you can do that can control or influence that aspect of the situation, then that part is completely out of your hands. And, you do what you can, you try what you can, but you're actually absolved of any sort of responsibility for what happens in that aspect at that point. So, once you have that mindset, and once you have the framework in place where, all right, there's ambiguity here, but it's not complete chaos, right? We know it's a finite ambiguity, and now we start to see the pieces in it and the structure of those things within this ambiguity. Now we have something we can start building on. And whether it's a good thing, like my current situation where I'm just trying to adapt to my new role and all the things I have on my plate, or something bad that's happened and our family is dealing with kind of a family tragedy at the moment, and there is ambiguity. I'm not saying there's not going to be pain, right? There's not going to be discomfort, because that's part of life, right? Change tends to be uncomfortable, whether it's positive change or negative change. But using these tools, you have a framework for dealing with that ambiguity. Like I said, you bookend it so it's finite, right? So it's not this infinite mass of ambiguity out there. You start seeing the pieces and how they fit together. Now you have a framework for understanding what's happening within the ambiguity. And then now you can take aspects of the unknown, have a hold of the framework that you've got, and now you can reach out and explore the ambiguity around these different pieces and start to make sense of it all. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. But I figured I would go ahead and record this episode because if you have been following along on the podcast and have been playing or experimenting with some of the ideas and techniques that I have thrown out, then I figured you may be dealing with this too. I mean, this is something that, these are all things that I learned decades ago and something that I tend to regularly put into practice. And it's one of the reasons where, we'll be in the midst of a flurry of activity at work and everybody remarks, that They're impressed how I'm able to stay calm in these situations. I even had one of the higher ups in the company actually stop and tell me, thank me, because I just seemed to bring a sense of calm to this project that was massive, and we were under the wire, and people weren't sure how it was going to happen, and we made it happen. And these techniques, right? The 3 circles that we know about, the understanding that it's all my fault, even if it's not, and these sort of techniques that I stole from Michael J. Gelb about dealing with ambiguity and using your sense of self and your senses and your both sides of your brain, the art and the science part, and the idea of connecting the dots is, those are responsible for my ability to stay calm and assess things and, just take control of what I can, do what needs to be done, help influence the things that I can, and ensure that what needs to be done gets done, and then understand that the rest is what it is. And that has served me well, and I hope that it will serve you in the future. I definitely recommend How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci by Gelb. It's G-E-L-B. That's been a huge influence in the way that I deal with things like this. I'd also recommend a book like Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins, which provides a framework for helping understand how your mind works and the things that hold you back. That's one more thing we can talk about. Yes, one of the best things you can do, like I said, is, come to the realization that it's all your fault, even when it isn't. If you can wrap your mind around that, that will get you probably 75% of the way towards being able to come up with a solution for whatever problem hits you. One thing you have to be careful of, especially in a situation where there's a lot of ambiguity like we're talking about today, is the brain hates ambiguity, right? The brain is a machine for discovering patterns. And it's also a machine for answering questions. The questions you ask, your brain subconsciously is going to work to find an answer for those questions. So if you have a habit of negative self-talk, oh, Danny, why are you so stupid? Oh, Danny, why do you always do this? Your brain is going to provide you with an answer for those questions. Oh, well, you're so stupid because this and this and this. Now, those things may not be true, but if you're not asking, hey, brain, what's the reality of this situation, of why I did what I did, then that's not the answers your brain is going to provide. If you ask yourself, oh, why are you so stupid? Even just saying, oh, you're so stupid. Well, your brain is going to call to mind every single time you do something that feels stupid. And so it's going to just reinforce that notion. So, for one thing, you have to be really careful about that. Another thing the brain does is it seeks to make sense of the world around it. And so, if something happens, and let's say this, a lot of times our phobias or the quirky parts of our personalities that we don't like often tend to be the result of something happening while something traumatic is also happening. So, think about it. If you, simple example, say you have a cat. If every time you walk into the room where the cat is, there's a loud explosion sound, right? let's just say that happens. And that explosion sound scares the cat. It's not going to take many times for your cat to associate you with the feeling it gets from that explosion sound. So now the fear of that explosion sound is suddenly transferred to you, so that even if you remove the explosive sound, anytime you enter the room, the cat's going to run off. And it doesn't take a lot of repetitions for that to happen. Sometimes, especially if the trauma is strong enough, whatever is happening, whatever's occupying your attention at the moment, when that catastrophic trauma happens, your brain associates those traumatic feelings with that thing. And so, that's how a lot of our attitudes, especially our negative attitudes about things, come about. Because something happened while this other thing was happening, and so now we've transferred the negative emotions to that other thing, even though it probably doesn't have anything, there is no cause and effect relationship there, but your brain has associated that as a cause with the effect that happened. So when we're dealing with a situation where there's ambiguity and your brain is struggling to make connections just so it can orient itself in the situation, we need to be really intentional about how we connect certain things. Because it would be easy for me to be in the situation where I am, where I've got lots of stuff suddenly dumped on my plate all at once. And now let myself get engulfed by feeling lost and frustrated and overwhelmed. And the last thing I want is for that feeling to become subconsciously associated to the idea of success, of me getting a promotion. Right? Because there are lots of good things that are happening as a result of this promotion, right? I'm being given responsibility over things that I enjoy being responsible for. And I'm looking forward to being able to have a very positive impact on the company due to the trust and responsibility that they have placed in me. So it would be easy, though, in spite of all that, for me to come in feeling overwhelmed, maybe even a little bit of panic sometimes, because deadlines are looming and there's just so much going on. And if I start associating, or if I allow my brain to associate that feeling of near panic or lack of control or whatever to the idea of me getting a promotion or even performing specific aspects of my job, that is going to have a terrible impact on my career and just the quality of my life in general. Last thing I want is to be afraid of success. Right? So, this is getting kind of long, so we'll wrap it up there. So, how to deal, to recap really quickly, if we can, Sinister ideas for dealing with ambiguity. Right? First, center yourself, make sure you're squared away. Then, try to place a bookend on the ambiguity, right? I'm here. I know what I need, right? With this ambiguous situation, the worst thing that could possibly happen is this, right? If this happens, I would have to do this to deal with it, right? So now we're dealing with finite ambiguity. We know where we are. We know what the worst possible end could be. The reality is going to be somewhere in the middle here. And then you just start paying attention to what's going on. What does the timeline look like? What things are you getting stressed out about? All right, now how do we deal with those quickly, or make it where we have processes so that we know those things are coming up so they don't sneak up on us again? Who can we ask for help? Who can we reach out to? Who can help us with these things? Kind of take that stress off of us a little bit. And then, all right, let's make sure we've defined all these things that we can define. So now we have our structure, and how are they connected? How are they interconnected? Now we have our framework. And now we can hold on to that framework as we begin to explore the ambiguities around those specific pieces. All right. And while we're doing this, we have to keep in mind that A, this is our fault, even if it's not. B, there are things we can control, things we can influence, and things we can't. We need to treat those things accordingly. And last, make sure that your brain is not looking for cause-effect relationships that don't exist, so that we don't get locked into patterns of fear or evasion around things that don't need to be feared or evaded. So I hope this helps, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for coming with me.